learners, welcome to this session. In the first session we have discussed crimes involved in human trafficking, where we have said that a person who has been trafficked is not an accused or somebody who is a violator of law and should be punished by the law, but that person is someone whose human rights are violated, whose fundamental rights are violated, whose statutory rights have been violated. So that person needs protection by the court of law, by the entire criminal administration system, and should be rehabilitated and reintegrated in the society. So now in the second part we will also discuss the other kinds of crimes which are there in cases of human trafficking. So we have discussed hurt, grievous hurt. Now we will discuss the other kinds of crimes. Section 339 talks about wrongful restraint. Whoever voluntarily obstructs any person so as to prevent that person from proceeding in any direction in which that person has a right to proceed is said wrongfully to restrain that person. There is one exception to it: the obstruction of a private way over land or water which a person in good faith believes him to have the lawful right to obstruct is not an offense within the meaning of this section. So wrongful restraint is there because you are confined in an area. You are not allowed to move out of the four walls. So you have a right to run away from that place, but you are living in captivity, so you cannot move. Your freedom of movement has been restrained. So this section will be applicable. Wrongful confinement is there in section 340 of the Indian Penal Code. Whoever wrongfully restrains any person in such a manner as to prevent that person from proceeding beyond certain subscribing limit is said wrongfully to confine that person. If you confine that person in a room, I am not allowing you to move out of that brothel house. I am confining you to a particular room. Then section 340 will be applicable. Wrongful confinement for 3 or more days is there in section 343 of Indian Penal Code. Whoever wrongfully confines any person for 3 days or more shall be punishable with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 2 years, or with fine, or with both. Section 344 talks about wrongful confinement for 10 or more days. Whoever wrongfully confines any person for 10 days or more shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 3 years, and shall also be liable to fine. And we find this, that people who have been trafficked have been confined for years in a factory, in a brothel, in a hotel, in a public space. So this happens that a person who has been trafficked cannot move. Section 346 talks about wrongful confinement in secret. Whoever wrongfully confines any person in such manner as to indicate an intention that the confinement of such person may not be known to any person interested in the person so confined, or to any public servant, or that the place of such confinement may not be known to or discovered by any such person or public servant, as herein before mentioned, shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 2 years, in addition to any other punishment to which he may be liable for such wrongful confinement. Section 347 talks about wrongful confinement to extort property or constrain to illegal act. This part is applicable in cases of human trafficking. Whoever wrongfully confines any person for the purpose of extorting from the person confined or from any person interested in the person confined any property or valuable security, or of constraining the person confined or any person interested in such person to do anything illegal, or to give any information which may facilitate the commission of an offence, shall be punished with imprisonment for either description for a term which may extend to 3 years, and shall also be liable to fine. So, I keep your children and tell you to do hazardous work. I take your children, just get a paper signed from you, and then I exploit them. I take your child or your girl for marriage, and then I make use of that person for sexual offenses or for other illegal crimes related to a person. Section 349 talks about force. A person is said to use force to another if he causes motion, change of motion, or cessation of motion to that other, or if he causes to any substance such motion or change of motion or cessation of motion as brings that substance into contact with any part of that other's body, or with anything which that other is wearing or carrying, or with anything so situated that such contact affects that other's sense of feeling, provided that the person causing the motion or change of motion or cessation of motion cause that motion, change of motion, or cessation of motion in one of the 3 ways defined: by his own bodily power, by disposing any substance in such a manner that the motion or change of cessation of motion takes place without any further act on his part or on the part of any of that other person, by inducing any animal to move, to change its motion, or to cease to move. So, if I use my body power, or I take a substance and then I just move it, I change the motion of that substance, or I induce an animal to move. Criminal force is there in section 350. Whoever intentionally uses force to any person without that person's consent in order to committing of any offense, or intending by the use of such force to cause, or knowing it to be likely that by the use of such force he will cause injury, fear, or annoyance to the person to whom the first force is used, is said to use criminal force to that other. Criminal force is used in cases of sexual offenses, in cases of labor exploitation, in cases of hazardous employment, in cases of children, in cases where out of your vulnerability I can just exploit you. Section 351 talks about assault. Whoever makes any gesture or any preparation intending or knowing it to be likely that such gesture or preparation will cause any person present to apprehend that he who makes that gesture or preparation is about to use criminal force to that person, is said to commit an assault. But mere words do not amount to an assault, but the words which a person uses may give to his gestures or preparations such a meaning as may make those gestures or preparations amount to an assault. So, in cases of trafficking where you just exercise force or criminal force or assault to overpower the other person, to force that person to just listen to you and do whatever he wants you to do, or something which is illegal, something which is without your consent, and somebody wants that you should just agree to whatever he says. It may be that he's asking for some organ. It may be that he wants you to work in his house as domestic help. It may be that you are forced to work in a factory. It may be that you may be forced to work in hazardous employment. And it can also be that you are drugged so that you do not say no, or you are not in your senses, so you cannot give your consent, or you cannot retaliate to the other person. Section 354 talks about assault or criminal force to women with intent to outrage her modesty. Whoever assaults or uses criminal force to any woman, intending to outrage or knowing it to be likely that he will thereby outrage her modesty, shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which shall not be less than 1 year, but which may extend to 5 years, and shall also be liable to fine. In cases of sexual offences, this section is applicable. Sexual harassment and punishment for sexual harassment has been given under section 354A. A man committing any of the following acts: physical contact and advances involving unwelcome and explicit sexual overtures, or a demand or request for sexual favors, or showing pornography against the will of a woman, or making sexually colored remarks, shall be guilty of the offense of sexual harassment. So very important, any person can contact physically, can advance unwelcome or sexual overtures, or can ask or demand or request for sexual favors, show pornography material against the will of the woman, and make comments or remarks, will be guilty of an offense of sexual harassment. And in cases of trafficking, this is seen even in cases of labor trafficking, in cases of children and in cases of women. This is seen that they have been abused. Any man who commits the offense specified in clause 1 or clause 2 or clause 3 of subsection 1 shall be punished with rigorous imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years, or with fine, or with both. Any man who commits the offense specified in clause 4 of subsection 1 shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 1 year, or with fine, or with both. So it is very important that we understand that you are not a customer but a violator of a law. You are violating the provisions of Indian Penal Code and different sections of POSCO, Juvenile Justice Act, the labor laws, and still you call that, okay, no, I am not a trafficker or not a person or not an accused in a crime, but I am a customer. So if you are violating the law, you are not a customer. You are a person who should be convicted by the court of law. Section 354B talks about assault or use of criminal force to women with the intent to disrobe. Any man who assaults or uses criminal force to any woman or abets such act with the intention of disrobing or compelling her to be naked shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which shall not be less than 3 years, but which may extend to 7 years, and shall also be liable to fine. In cases of sexual offences, in cases of trafficking, we find this even with small children. So this section is applicable on all these people who are so-called customers. Section 354C talks about voyeurism. Any man who watches or captures the image of a woman engaging in any private act in circumstances where she would usually have the expectation of not being observed either by the perpetrator or by any other person at the behest of the perpetrator, or disseminate such image shall be punishable on first conviction with imprisonment for either description for a term which shall not be less than 1 year, but which may extend to 3 years, and shall also be liable to fine and be punished on a second or subsequent conviction with imprisonment of either description for a term which shall not be less than 3 years, but which may extend to 7 years, and shall also be liable to fine. So this is a very important section added by criminal law amendment. And we have spoken about the consent of a woman. So even if she is a prostitute, still if she says no, that should have a meaning. For the purpose of this section, private act includes an act of watching carried out in a place which in the circumstances which would reasonably be expected to provide privacy, and where the victim's genitals, posterior or breast are exposed or covered only in underwear, or the victim is using a lavatory, or the victim is doing a sexual act that is not of a kind ordinarily done in public, where the victim consents to capture the image of any act but not to their dissemination to third persons, and where such image or act is disseminated, such dissemination shall be considered an offense under this section. And this is why we need to train our children about cyber crimes. And the use of technology has to be very limited in a focused way with proper training and awareness. So even if you have given consent, but that consent is only for a particular person and not for the public at large. When you go to a public place, you use a washroom, or you just use a changing room or a hotel, then your privacy should be protected. If your privacy is not being protected, and if there are hidden cameras, transparent glasses and other devices to capture such moments, then this section will be applicable. Stalking is mentioned under section 354D. Any man who follows a woman and contacts or attempts to contact such woman to foster personal interaction repeatedly despite a clear indication of disinterest by such woman, or monitors the use by a woman of the internet, email or other forms of electronic communication, commits the offense of stalking. So we have seen that there are stalkers who try to hack and get all your details, provided that such conduct shall not amount to stalking if the man who pursued it proves that it was pursued for the purpose of preventing or detecting crime, and the man accused of stalking has been entrusted with the responsibility of prevention and detection of crime by the state, or it was pursued under any law or to comply with any law. in the particular circumstances such conduct was reasonable and justified. In cases of human trafficking, this proviso is not applicable because the traffickers do not have any kind of legal binding. Whoever commits the offense of stalking shall be punished on first conviction with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 3 years, and shall also be liable to fine, and be punished on a second or subsequent conviction with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 5 years, and shall also be liable to fine. Section 355 talks about assault or criminal force with intent to dishonor person otherwise than on grave provocation. Whoever assaults or uses criminal force to any person intending thereby to dishonor that person otherwise than on grave and sudden provocation given by that person shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 2 years, or with fine, or with both. Section 357 talks about assault or criminal force in attempt wrongfully to confine a person. Whoever assaults or uses criminal force to any person in attempting wrongfully to confine that person shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 1 year, or with fine which may extend to 1,000 rupees, or with both. Kidnapping has been defined under section 359. Kidnapping is of two types: kidnapping from India and kidnapping from lawful guardianship. Kidnapping from India is whoever conveys any person beyond the limit of India without the consent of that person or of someone legally authorized to consent on behalf of that person is said to kidnap that person from India. This happens in cases of human trafficking. Kidnapping from lawful guardianship: whoever takes or entices any minor under 16 years of age if a male, or under 18 years of age if a female, or any person of unsound mind, out of the keeping of the lawful guardian of such minor or person of unsound mind without the consent of such guardian, is said to kidnap such minor or person from lawful guardianship. So 361 talks about kidnapping from lawful guardianship. So if a male is under 16 years of age, a female is under 18 years of age, and any person who is of unsound mind is taken away by that person without the consent of the lawful guardian, then that is kidnapping. The words lawful guardian in this section include any person lawfully entrusted with the care or custody of such minor or other person. So even in the homes, you have a custody of that person. So if even from a home a person is kidnapped, this section will be applicable. It is very important for us to understand that trafficking happens at all ages in all parts of the country, and we have to understand these crimes so that we are able to prevent the crime from being happening, and we are able to protect ourselves and our family members. Abduction is there in 362. Whoever by force compels or by any deceitful means induces any person to go from any place is said to abduct that person. In cases of trafficking, when you lure a person, you just give him so many fanciful ideas of your lifestyle being changed, of your life being changed. So you are trying to deceive that person. So if you abduct somebody from his or her family, then this section will be applicable. Kidnapping or maiming a minor for the purposes of begging is given under section 363A. Whoever kidnaps any minor or not being the lawful guardian of a minor, obtain the custody of the minor in order that such minor may be employed or used for the purpose of begging, shall be punishable with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 10 years and shall also be liable to fine. Whoever maims any minor in order that such minor may be employed or used for the purpose of begging shall be punishable with imprisonment for life and shall also be liable to fine. Where any person not being the lawful guardian of a minor employs or uses such minor for the purposes of begging, it shall be presumed unless the contrary is proved that he kidnapped or otherwise obtained the custody of that minor in order that the minor might be employed or used for the purpose of begging. So these people are not the customers. These people are not the people who are providing them employment, but are violators of the law and should be handled strictly. In this section, begging means soliciting or receiving alms in a public place, whether under the pretense of singing, dancing, fortune telling, performing tricks or selling articles or otherwise, entering on any private premises for the purpose of soliciting or receiving alms, exposing or exhibiting with the object of obtaining or extorting alms by any sore wound, injury, deformity or disease, whether of himself or any other person or of any animal. Using a minor as an exhibit for the purpose of soliciting or receiving alms. You must have seen small children or small babies, newborn babies with these beggars. Now we will understand section 365, which talks about kidnapping or abducting with the intent secretly and wrongfully to confine person. Whoever kidnaps or abducts any person with the intent to cause that person to be secretly or wrongfully confined shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 7 years and shall also be liable to fine. So we will continue with the other sections in the next session, but till then I would just like to tell you that now you have understood that that person who has been trafficked is not a criminal, or not a offender, not a person who should be looked down upon. That person needs respect, that person needs care and protection by the law, by the people, and that person needs to be rehabilitated and reintegrated in the society because that person has suffered so much of injury, so much of abuse and trauma with the trafficker. So we need to be sensible, we need to understand that a victim or survivor of the trafficking is not a culprit. So instead of looking down upon them, we should have a sense of responsibility to make the systems in place so that people are not trafficked. Thank you all for listening this session. Have a safe time.